Hey everybody, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about the relationship between the states and the federal government. Let's do it. Alright, so this video is all about federalism. Federalism is the division of power between the national and state and local governments. So with that in mind, we have three different types of governmental powers we're going to discuss. There are delegated powers, reserved powers, and concurrent powers. Delegated powers are those that are given to the federal government. It's helpful to remember that the states existed before the federal government did. The states created the U.S. Constitution, therefore they gave some power, or delegated some power, to the federal government. There are some powers, though, that states kept for themselves. These are reserved powers. So they delegated some things to the federal and reserved some things for themselves. Concurrent powers are powers they both share. So both the federal governments and states can do these things. So just as some examples, delegated powers, we can think of things like foreign policy. So declaring war, making treaties, coining money. These are all examples of things that only the federal government can do. They have been delegated to the federal. Reserved powers include things that are not mentioned in the Constitution specifically. So they're in charge of things like education, things like police, health, welfare, licensing. These are all reserved to the states. Concurrent powers are again things that both can do. So these include things like taxing and borrowing money. Now there are two main types of federalism that we've had in the course of American history. We've had dual federalism, and today we have more of a cooperative federalism. Dual federalism is sometimes called layer cake federalism. And the idea is just like that layer cake. See how you have layers of chocolate and a layer of vanilla and they don't really mix, they don't overlap? That's like the states and the federal government in dual federalism, where they each have their own job. So the state is one layer, the federal is the other layer. They don't mix, they don't mingle. They each have clearly delineated responsibilities. They're each supreme in their own sphere. They stick to their job, and they don't mix with the other. But today, we have something much more like cooperative federalism, also known as marble cake federalism. So just like with that marble cake, and you can see how the chocolate and vanilla is swirled together, it's mixed, it's hard to get a bite that doesn't have both of those things. That's much more like our government today, where it's hard to know exactly what's a reserved power and what's delegated power. Where does the federal government stop? Where do state governments begin? That line has become very blurred. The biggest reason for the blurring of that line has been the increase in something known as grants in aid. Basically, this is just federal money given to the states. So what the federal government has done is actually quite clever over the last 100 years or so. There are all these areas that they technically don't have the ability to make policy in. So what they do is they offer a whole bunch of money in the form of grants to the states. And they say, hey, listen, we know you guys want this money. If you do, come and get it. But by the way, when you come to get that money, just make sure you follow these rules that we set. We're going to get into some more specific vocab in just a moment that highlights that. But that's the big picture idea I want you guys to have as we go into this more nuanced discussion. So there are two main types of grants. So we're going to break this down a little bit further. Categorical grants and block grants. Categorical grants represent federal money to the states for a specific purpose. So Congress says, here's $10 million, here's exactly what you have to do with it. So for example, this is money for you to use on new school construction. The state likes it because they get that money, but they have to do exactly what Congress tells them to do with that money. They don't have very much freedom. Congress, though, likes categorical grants. We know this because about 90% of all federal money to the states comes in the form of categorical grants. Why do they like it? Because they get to tell the states exactly what to do. So this increases federal power, gives them more control. Now, sometimes they include what's known as either conditions of aid or incentives. What that means is, like I described a little while ago, they tell the states, if you want this money for that new school construction, here's what we need you to do. We need you to set up some kind of, let's say, standardized testing for your students. And the states may not want to do this. Technically, this is optional. The state could say, you know what, we're going to pass. We'd rather not have your money because we don't want to give into your federal education standards. We want to make our own education policy. States are totally allowed to do this, and sometimes they do. But very often the allure of that money is so strong that the state gives up some of their power in exchange for getting that money. A classic example of this came in the mid-80s, and this is when the Reagan administration wanted all the states to raise their drinking age to 21. But that's not a federal power. The federal government had no power to just set a minimum drinking age. That's up to each state. So what they did was they threatened the states. They said, all right, if you want to keep getting the full amount of the grants that you receive for federal highways, then what you have to do is raise your drinking age to 21. If you don't, we're going to cut that money by 10% every year. And guess what every state had done by the end of the decade? They raised their drinking age. Could states have fought valiantly for the right of 18 to 20-year-olds to drink alcohol legally? They could have, but they wanted to get that money. But there's another tactic that the federal government can use. They can create what's known as a mandate, and this can be either funded or unfunded. A mandate is a specific rule of what states must do. But what's different here is that this is regardless of whether or not the federal government gives them money. So this isn't a do this if you want to get the money. This is simply do this. You must comply with this policy. So states typically do not like mandates very much, especially unfunded, because first of all, they're losing power, and second of all, they have to pay for the thing that the federal government is making them do. Now, there are two things states do like a little bit more than those. They like block grants and formerly something known as revenue sharing. Block grants are again money that the federal government gives to the states, but this time it's for a more broad purpose. So instead of saying, all right, this is money that must be spent on new school construction, it would come for a broad area of spending like education. So the states now have more discretion. They could use that money to build a new school, but they could also use it for textbooks or for hiring teachers or for whatever they want to do within education. Notice that they can't do anything with the money. They could not use that money for, let's say, highways or transportation, but anything in education they could use that money for, so states like this because they have more freedom. From the 1970s into the 1980s, there was something known as federal revenue sharing. This no longer exists. However, it is on the course outline, so you do need to know what it is. It's the idea that the federal government would give money to the states, and that's it. No strings attached, no conditions, just here's the money, do whatever you'd like with it. Obviously, the states really liked that, but that no longer exists. So again, we come back to that big question, why has there been such a dramatic increase in grants? A couple of reasons. The federal government likes it because they get power. They're able to make policy in areas that they formerly couldn't make policy in. So why do the states go along with it? For the states, there's the trade-off. They love getting that federal money because think about it, they get to spend the money, but they don't have to tax their own citizens. So a governor, a state legislature, can criticize the federal government for having taxes being too high, but they get the benefit of spending that money without actually having to raise taxes themselves. So that's a pretty good deal for the states. They don't like it though because of those conditions of aid, because of the rules that they have to follow in order to get that money. So they lose some power, but they get money. So that's the trade-off. So the big picture trend for the last 200 years has been the federal government has grown stronger and stronger while states have typically gotten weaker. Now, there has been a little bit of a movement back in the other direction since the 1980s, and this is known as devolution. Ronald Reagan specifically is very associated with this term, and this is the idea of giving some power back to the state governments. So there have been some policies, like the Welfare Reform Act, that attempted to give more power back to the states over these sorts of policy areas. Alright guys, well that's it for me, so until next time, this has been a La Money production. Hey, thanks again guys for watching this video. I hope that it helped. If you did, help me out. Hit that like button for me. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you guys next time.